Well, hello there. Hi, Kirk. Hi, Anne
Hello, Sheldon
Marie.
Hi.
Welcome.
and
Uh,
Marie.
Anne Marie, how
Hello.
are you doing today?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
Doing good. Kirk, you? I
I'm
hear you're going to
still,
get some little bit of cold weather there. It's only
yeah, well, it's starting to
minus
snow around
33
here.
here today.
Freezing rain tonight and tomorrow
Oh,
morning.
beautiful. At least we have sun. Sure, it's like
Yeah.
dripping icicles, but it's yeah.
I don't like it when the trees start breaking. If you get too much ice rain, which has happened around here, trees start breaking. But I'm hoping that doesn't go that far. Anne Marie, were you able to get out for some fresh air this morning before?
Absolutely. You know
Good.
me. I got to get out there.
I figured. I figured you'd probably be out there.
Do you get out there before your hair is dry after your shower, or do you always do the shower thing after you go outside?
Oh, come on. You need a shower after
Okay.
exercise.
Yeah, like
At least I do.
well, some people need two, but like I know my girls are always complaining. Yeah, I can't walk to school. My hair is wet. Well,
Oh, I've done that. Like I used to in university, you'd be phys ed building, and it'd be 35 below, and you'd work out and have your shower. You'd walk over to physics, which is the far side of campus, and by the time you got there, it's like you got a hard helmet on because
ice
it
helmet.
just freezes.
You just weren't wearing the right kind of toque.
Oh, you don't
Well,
want
the
to be
toque
wearing
would
toques.
freeze.
That
The
gives you
toque,
toque head when you
yeah.
take it off.
And,
Well, okay. I've,
or you, if you can take it off, because the toque will sometimes freeze to your
yeah.
hair.
Yeah.
The joy of living in Canada. And those of you that are in the States right now, in the middle of the plains, I think you're getting a good ice storm or something in the next couple days here, which isn't going to be good. So we're praying for you. All right. Kirk, why don't you do some introductions and we'll get right into this. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, well, today's guest is Anne Marie, and I'm kind of excited to hear her story. She actually grew up in what I would call Northern Ontario, and maybe you can expand a little bit about that, Emery, because I always have fond memories of more rural areas and what goes on and what kids do in rural areas. But Anne Marie, you've been I've known you for probably, I guess, almost 40 years now as a colleague, and but yet this
So since I
part of
was
your
5,
five, wow. But this
just saying.
aspect of your story is I've only learned more recently as I've gotten to know you a little bit better. So I'm really looking forward to hearing. I guess why don't we start off with just a little bit about you and your childhood and some of the frustrations you experienced on this topic.
Yeah. Well, I come from a large family, 7 kids in all. And so I was surrounded by boys. I had an elder brother, and then fairly quickly, within a year, I had another brother, and then a year later, I had a third brother. And so it took a little while for my sisters to come along. They came around 4 and 8 years after I did. So we didn't play very much. And in my neighborhood, of course, it was all boys my age. So first thing I want to say is my environment was a masculine environment when it came to just having fun. And I was really jealous of the boys for different reasons. And of course, the first thing a girl is jealous of is the penis. You know, the fact that you can go out in the bush and you can actually pee standing up without having to disrobe and crouch. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's freedom there. And so I discovered that I wasn't a boy fairly quickly, right? Because I was surrounded by boys. And I was really upset at the fact that I didn't have this cool skill that guys did. So I discovered gender early, but then I started to discover that I really liked doing everything my brothers and their friends did. I liked playing with trucks. I liked playing with Meccano. I liked just pushing myself physically. I liked going off into the bush for the day. And yes, my mother allowed me to go off into the bush alone for the day when I was about 5 or 6. We had a lot of freedom back then. We weren't really afraid of letting kids go off and experience things. So, but
Our idea when we were kids is the helicopter parents were the ones that would drop you out of the helicopter in an unknown area.
That's right. And so there was a lot of freedom, but there were also social expectations of what girls should be like and what boys should be like. And, girls were supposed to wear like, because I'm old, right? I'm 65. And so I would say that the gender expectations, the social expectations for girls and boys were fairly well defined at the time. And I noticed that Mama Kay said that she's still a tomboy as an adult. Well, that was a word that was bandied around a lot about me, was that I was a tomboy. And in French, the word is garçon manqué, which basically means should have been a guy, or taken differently, a guy with something missing. And so my mom called me this, my brothers called me this, everybody called me this, just because I seem to enjoy guy things a lot more than girl things. And that just continued all the way I was growing up. I love science. I love going out into the bush and doing some geology, searching for, I was in Sudbury, so I was always searching for precious stuff. I would, fight with my brothers, learn to box. I would do all kinds of things and think and enjoy them. But I knew that I wasn't being a girl when I did them. I knew I wasn't being like other girls who wanted to look pretty and play with dolls and talk a lot. And this made me really wish I was a boy. And so the next best thing to wishing you're a boy when you're a kid is you ask your dad, can you cut my hair like you cut my brothers? And when I asked my dad this, he got pretty upset. He got pretty, oh, gee, what am I going to do? And my mom came along because she was a little bit like me as a child, okay? And she said, don't worry. She'll grow into her identity. Just let her be. And I still remember her saying that. Because then my dad, he didn't give me the brush cut I wanted, but he cut it pretty short. And the other thing my dad did was he let me discover the things I was interested in. Like every time we worked on the car, he'd let me come and help and he'd explain how everything worked. If he was doing work on the house, renovations, he'd let me learn how to use all the tools and learn how to make cement and how to use a hammer. And so my dad let me be who I was. School was a little different, School, at the time you had to wear a uniform and girls had to wear, a jumper, which is kind of like a dress. And so I would wear the jumper, but I'd always wear either shorts or pants underneath it because I didn't want clothes stopping me from doing the things I wanted. And I really hated having to be limited by clothing that wasn't suitable for jumping and playing and hanging upside down on monkey bars. So I was a guy in my head. I liked being around guys. I liked playing like guys. I liked doing things that guys did. But of course, physically, I wasn't a guy. So that's my childhood, is like getting to know a few girls, realizing there's not much we like to do in common, and hanging around boys more than girls, and really enjoying sports and trying to be better than my brothers. And often as a child, you can be, by the way. As a child, there's really not much separating us physically in terms of capacities. So that's my childhood.
Especially since you were older. Like you could boss them around at that point.
Well, I would even take them into the bush. I mean, I lost them once. I took him up into the bush.
Intentionally?
And we went so far away that I really didn't know how to get back.
Okay.
And so I said, we're going to have to go up onto the highest hills we can find our house again. So, I mean, I knew how to get back home, right? I mean,
Good thinking.
I was about 5. So they were pretty small, 4 and 3. So, like I said, we had a lot of freedom in the home. It was more society around us. And a little later, there's a lot of freedom as a child, but then comes puberty. And that's when things really become difficult for those of us who aren't too thrilled with being a girl. So I don't know if you guys want me to talk about that, if you have any questions.
You had mentioned your mom saying that you'd grow into your identity. Do you know what she meant by that at the time? Or was that just a word that didn't really click in for you as a kid, and you were, they were talking, you were just, it's over your head.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's face it, in my day, we didn't talk about sex very much, or gender, or anything like that. So I thought what she was saying is just let her be. Just let her be. She'll find out who she is. That was my understanding of it. So it's more like let her be who she wants to be. That's what I understood. We have to understand, like at that time, the whole idea of gender affirmation, surgery and all that stuff. I mean, cosmetic surgery was something very, very rare. So I would never have understood anything like that. At the time, it wasn't even discussed.
So when you that takes you up to puberty, and then so why don't you just say whatever you would like to say regarding your puberty teenage years? Let's say junior high, high school. What happened then?
Okay, well, I continued to be very, very physically active, very adventurous, skiing down hills that didn't have it, that didn't have a ski trail. So I continued being like that until I got sick in my 30s, So I was always this adventurous, sporty person, interested in anything that was mechanical, anything that was scientific, anything that was math related. I got along great with the guys as a friend. But then puberty hits, and it hit a little later for me than for most girls. It was about 14. And I felt like I was losing a quarter of my life. We don't talk about periods or menses very much, especially in mixed company. But I hated my body. I hated what was happening to it. Every time that would come, I just feel so uncomfortable. Uncomfortable with the pain, uncomfortable with the blood, uncomfortable with just feeling yucky. And so I was really frustrated about being a girl and having to go through this. And it was 7 days every month that just was a lot of pain and just horrid, and made me feel less free to go out in the bush, less free to go swimming, less free to do things. And so I kind of resented the fact that I was a girl. Well, not kind of, I resented the fact that I was a girl. I resented guys not having to go through this, being able to spend their whole lives not having to go through hormone hell, although I guess they do go through certain kind of hormone hell themselves. So the limits of that my body was imposing on me were very frustrating. There's nothing I could do about it.
And now, what about your relationships with the boys you spent so much time playing with as you were before this? Was there now developing a schism or a distancing there? Was it awkward to play with the boys? Were you
What
about your friendships with guys?
Yeah, I still had friendships with guys.
Mm-hmm.
But the ability to work on an equal playing field was no longer there, because as they entered puberty, they became stronger than me and bigger than me. And so the differences were making me feel like I didn't fit in either world. I didn't fit as much in the masculine world, but I certainly didn't fit in the feminine world.
Can you describe what those two worlds, when you're comparing them? What did the female versus masculine world, or feminine versus masculine world, look like to you then?
Yeah, like, I think gender is a social construct. It's what the society expects men and women to be. It's what society expects our interests and our abilities to be. And that can vary by generation. It can vary by culture. It can vary in all kinds of different ways. And for me, it was like women are gentler. Like my mom used to say, Anne-Marie, you gotta let the boys win once in a while.
Let us win. Come on, Anne-Marie.
No, seriously.
Yeah, okay,
this
whatever.
was said to me because they have an ego. And you'll lose your friendships if you don't let them win once in a while. Okay. And the other thing that was told me was, Anne Marie, you got to kind of hide the fact that you're smart because boys don't like smart girls. And I was beginning to find boys, well, at least one or two boys, interesting. In other words, I developed I was discovered I was heterosexual. I was interested in one or two boys. And so, but it bothered me that I was being told, you can't just be you. And that's really what was going on, was that you can't just be you. You have to fit into uh, certain expectations on you. And that's what gender distinctions do for people. We stop looking at each other as individuals and we start categorizing people. And I didn't fit the category that was popular, and so I felt out of it. I wasn't interested in clothes. I wasn't interested in makeup. I wasn't interested in talking about boys. I was really interested in academic pursuits. I was really interested in sports. And actually my sport interest became individual as a teen. Whereas before I used to play hockey with the boys and basketball with the boys and baseball with the boys. As a girl, they didn't really want to play with me. Like if I wanted to play hockey, they just wanted me to be the goalie and that was it. Because I couldn't compete anymore. So I started being
Hey, I was a goalie.
okay, but you know what I mean? And you like to skate
I know,
fast
I
and
get it.
yeah, it was like you just stay there so we don't hurt you kind of thing. And so it was like I couldn't be the person I wanted to be. Like the society seemed to be pushing me into a mold. My dad even said, Anne Marie, why do you want to go to university? You're just going to get married and have kids. And of course, that created in me the desire to stay single for life, which of course I didn't follow. But in my teens, early 20s, I did want to stay single for life. I wanted to avoid the whole issue of marriage and all of that would involve.
You're muted, Kirk.
Yeah.
It's a new thing.
Yeah.
It's a new feature.
I just mute myself because my coffee cup goes clang on the coaster every time I put it down. You said that you felt that society was pushing you into a mold, and that's, yeah, there were clear expectations there of what girls do, what guys do. But I guess that raises a question in my mind. Today's society tries not to do that. In fact, I would never, in a public situation, try and say this is what people are like. But at the same time, there are people who say, I identify as a man or a woman. But what sort of molds are they appealing to if society has tried to do away with those? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think that the molds have disappeared. You watch TV. You look at games. You look at how they're representing women and men in different environments. Maybe they're not saying it, but they're showing it all the time. You look at ads. And I'm sorry, but you got to be pretty if you're a girl. You got to be thin if you're a girl. You got to be, sexy if you're a girl. Those things are still out there. I think they're even out there more. I think we've become hypersexualized, first of all. I think that I'm actually really perturbed by how men and women are both being sexualized and treated like sex objects. And so I personally think that our society has created even worse molds than when I was a child, because I find them even less healthy. And
Do you see it as being I sort of hear Kirk saying that there's now girl hockey leagues. There's now if you want to the term equality is used a lot in terms of equal pay. Women's soccer in Canada right now is fighting for equal pay. There's so much of that where we need to be the same, distinct in different ways, because if you put all the women soccer players on the men's team, they're not going to be able to make the team. But there's still a desire to have all the same outcomes in
Yeah.
terms of the things that matter, money, those kind of things.
But like you said, we're still a society that puts people into categories. And what I find interesting about that is that categories always make us feel like we're either insiders or outsiders, depending on how those categories are defined. And yes, I think that there is less of that, oh, girls don't do this or boys don't do this, than there was. I think, I mean, I grew up, right, with the feminist movement. I was feminist. I was, women should be able to do anything they can do, and men should be able to do anything they can do. And so I did grow up with that, and I believe that. But now I've gone even further. I've said, each and every single person in this world is unique. Each one of us is created by God. I'm a Christian, so I believe every one of us is created by God for specific things. And that we harm people when we don't let them be who they are and tell them they can't be that because they have certain genitalia and not others. And I think that really is why, like as Mama Kay says here, molds are why kids are pushed as the opposite sex if their interests aren't traditional. I think it's because we have expectations. So when a child who's a boy wants to do things that are classified as feminine in the society, he might grow up thinking, oh, maybe I should look like a girl, or maybe I should become, I should take on the appearance of a girl so people aren't continually teasing me or bullying me or saying mean things about me. And so I think that that's still very much the case, that we don't let each child be who they are fully, and we put expectations on them. I don't know how you feel about that, or what your thinking is on that.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to the molds that people get pushed into as far as girls do this and boys do that. I know when we had 4 boys in a row, and then we had 2 girls. And so by the time the girl came along, we had nothing but boys' toys. And I wasn't concerned about that at all. I figured, I don't see why they can't play with the boys' toys. Now, it turned out that they naturally, as they went to their friend's house and saw other kinds of toys and things, that they naturally went in the direction whatever they wanted to play with, and they did not really find a lot of the boys' toys that interesting. Others did. But there's another kind of mold you suggested that's in today's society, and when you describe this kind of unwritten mold, or this society has tried to do away with the molds, but then something else has emerged. You mentioned sexualized, and I've certainly seen that in Instagram, for example. The Instagram stars, the women, well, there's a good deal of display of their physical attributes, and the guys, I think, the guys' contribution is to, well, there's going to be a lot more views from guys. So there's this implicit endorsement of another kind of, almost a physical, it seems to have degenerated into just a sexual thing. I don't know. It's different, and it's not healthy. I would agree. There's something that I find I'm dismayed at, because they've set aside these other ones that, were expectations of whatever culture they have to grow in. But then instead, this has been embraced. So it seems that possibility is that we all need a certain amount of value and significance and identity. But what is that ultimate? What does provide that ultimate value, significance, and identity? Because it seems we've just jumped out of one problem into a more, I'd say, almost animalistic problem now with the hypersexualization. So there seems to be a need for this, but both directions don't seem healthy. So what would you say is the solution to this problem? How does a person find significant value and identity in whatever unique way they are?
Well, I can't speak for everybody, but what changed my life was coming to know Jesus, was coming to know God, was coming to know my Creator. And over the course of 10 years, okay, this was not one day I'm thinking this way, and the next day I'm thinking a whole different way. But over the course of 10 years, God began to free me from my frustration over expectations. Okay? Because I realized part of us wants to meet expectations. We want to be loved. We want to be accepted. We want to be part of the in-person. But if we have to put aside who we are to do that, there's a deep, deep sense of dissatisfaction and pain and hypocrisy, if you will, that gets settled. And so what God did slowly was, first of all, he just filled me with his love for me. And there's something very, very unique about God's love. We don't find this anywhere else because God knows us 100%. He's our creator and he loves us just as we are. I could come to God and not have to hide who I was, not have to pretend to be someone else. I could be me totally with him. And that's the way he accepts us. We're his children. He's created us. And I firmly believe that every single strength and weakness we have is part of his plan for us. And so gradually, though it took me a while, I said, God, thank you. For some reason, you wanted me to be female instead of male, even though males are, males seem to be able to serve you more easily than females. But thank you. I'm going to trust you with the fact that you gave me these genitalia. Okay.
Now, expand on this.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Kirk.
I was going to say males seem to serve you more easily. And I think probably you and I probably don't believe this. At least I seem to think that, well, easily within human structures.
Yes, because you see,
within God's plan,
yeah,
that might be different.
I'll give you a little example. When I was a kid, my mom caught me playing priest one day downstairs. And she said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm a priest giving the Eucharist." And she says, "You can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" "Because you're a girl." Okay, so right from when I was a child, the idea of even when it came to serving God, there were things that were off the table for girls that weren't off the table for guys. Okay, and so I grew up with this sense that boys just had more freedom in every area, especially, and even that one. And a lot of people around me felt that way too, that girls shouldn't be doing certain of the things that I ended up doing over my lifetime. But like I said, if you're following God and doing what he wants, you can kind of do what he wants, even if not everyone agrees with the rightness of what you're doing.
You are a bit of a troublemaker.
I am.
I have to say that. My question for you is when you're having these conversations with God over that 10-year period, how much of it was like what you would see in the Psalms where it's like, I don't like this. I have a problem with this. God, why did you do this?
Yeah.
How much of that was it versus, okay, I'm starting to come to grips with how my identity.
Yeah. And so it's always, I just finished reading the Psalms yesterday, right? So yeah, it's really amazing. If anyone's feeling like they need to express all kinds of emotions they don't think they can express to God, just read the Psalms and you'll see nothing's off the table. That's where I learned that I could be anyone, like I could be myself fully with God, the big, the bad, the ugly, the good. I didn't have to filter me. And that's the freedom that I found in God, is there's no filters. Whereas in society, I would always go, can I do this? Can I not do this? Will it upset people if I do this? I ask that question a lot when even in a church context, it's like, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to say this? Am I allowed to want to do this? Those questions came to me. And I don't know if guys ever asked those kinds of questions because the same restrictions aren't put on men in ministry that were being put on women in ministry in my time. But interestingly enough, what wasn't allowed in a local church was allowed in mission. And so God took me to a place where those restrictions didn't exist. And he took me into a way of serving him where those restrictions wouldn't hinder me. And so God has his way of getting around the restrictions we want to put on people. So that's part of it. But part of it too is just learning, you know what, I'm not here to serve other people or do what other people want. I'm here to do what God wants me to do. And to be the person God made me to be.
So
Now, when
going
you
back
talk,
to, oh,
sorry.
sorry. Go ahead, Kirk.
When you mentioned the importance of accepting you as the way you are, I'm not sure I phrased it precisely. You can actually clarify that. How much of, let's say, I think society today is probably very much about accepting myself the way I am, but they make a distinction between themselves and their body. They feel they should not accept their body the way it is. Now, where is the line if we're to accept ourselves the way we are, and that includes the body that God has given me? Where is the line where, let's say, for example, I'm short-sighted, so I've taken some action to kind of rectify that, and so there are physical situations where we may want to not accept the way we are, and so where's that? Have you thought through where this kind of gray area, this boundary, the borderlands between accepting and not accepting?
Actually,
just to take on to that, Damery, if you were growing up in the culture we have now, with there's more of a push to fix the problem permanently, regardless of, like, this isn't a political discussion or anything.
Right.
This is like everybody's got this experience where something isn't right, and some people feel that different ways. So what would that have looked like for you if you were in today's culture?
Like I really can't put myself in today's culture as a child because I'm not one. But I can say that because science was important to me, I would have, looked at sex change operations, says what does it do and what does it not do. And it's actually classified as cosmetic surgery. Okay, and why is it classified as cosmetic? It's because you can only change your appearance. You can't change your you can't change your DNA. You can't go from XX to XY, okay, or XXY to XXY. What your DNA is, and there's nothing that medicine can do right now to change that. You can't change your ovaries and the eggs produced by the ovaries or existing in the ovaries into sperm, and you can't change sperm into eggs. In other words, you can change your appearance to look more male or more female because you can take drugs and you can get parts cut off or modified, but you can't change your sex. And so what we have to really, I think when we're talking with children about this, we have to explain the limits of the surgery, the limits of what the surgery can do, and understand that it really is an aspect of cosmetic surgery. And as you and I know, cosmetic surgery is a booming industry because I personally believe there's no one in the world who's utterly happy with who they are. And I believe, given the money and the opportunity, a lot of people want to change things about themselves. I was recently reading just this week about men wanting to get leg extension surgery to be taller. And so this desire this idea that I will be happier if I change my body in some way or another is very, very widespread. I mean, we've seen, movie stars buy into it. We've seen a lot of people buy into it. The idea I can't just be me and be happy is a lot more widespread. And I mean, even look at athletes and the fact that they'll take steroids to be stronger or more performing, and all those performance enhancing drugs. So to me, it goes way beyond what, being a guy or a girl. It goes towards being okay with the limits that I have, being okay with the imperfections I have, being okay with the fact that I'm not all I want to be. And that's what God freed me up to do too, is just to say, I don't have all the gifts. I don't have all the abilities. And You both know that I've been sick for the last 30 years. And so I don't
and when
even
she says sick, it's
sick.
there's dramatic issues that happen that, like, allergic to grass is not fun.
No. Allergic to most things, and then having neurological reactions to some allergens, which would put me in wheelchairs. So what I'm saying is, I think every single person in the world wants to be different. And I think that that's because we're all yearning for the eternity God has for us. And that we were created for an eternity where we will have bodies that fully represent who we are, that are without any trace of the fall, any trace of sin. We will have persons who are without sin and without issues. We will be able to fully love God, fully love others in perfect unity. There won't be any outsiders. And so I think a lot of this struggle is actually based on a yearning for God that we are not aware of.
That's key, I think, what you're saying there, Anne Marie, the ability to accept myself for the way I accept who I am and what my body, what kind of body I've got here. It makes a huge difference, I think, at least to me, between thinking this life is all there is, and so we better do everything in our power to realize my dreams for what I think I am, or what I would like to be, actually, what I would like to be, because then I think I will find more happiness that way. That's one scenario. This life is all there is, and I totally understand devoting all our resources, if that was the case, to trying to realize our dreams, whatever they may be. But the other view is that this life is actually only, well, when it's over, the eternity is ahead that you've just talked about. This life is really in preparation for eternity. And what we experience in this life is like a dream when it's over, that we'll be pretty vague on what were actually the details of it. It just seems so short in relative to eternity. So I can accept the way I am much better, knowing this isn't really what I'm going to wind up with in the end. Like you just described, it'll be, well, there's one passage that says it has not even entered the heart of a human being what God has prepared for those who love him. So acceptance of the way we are really does hinge on your larger view on what this life actually is. Is this all there is, or is it just the preliminary to the main event?
And it's also, I believe that God is sovereign, and that the limits he has put on me were part of his guiding of me. I'm a mom with 3 girls. And frankly, the day I fully accepted the fact that God had created me as a woman was the day I held my first daughter in my arms. And I was just amazed that God had given me this privilege. The privilege not only of holding her in my arms, but actually bringing her into the world, of having a body that was able to do that, was able to care for her. And it was like the first time I really, really thank God that he had made me a woman, like from the heart, where like problem solved. So that's really, I mean, I was still kind of working through gender in the church even then. Okay. And I'm still working that one through. Actually, I'm still studying scriptures on that one, and writing a book about it, which will come out in about a year. And I have a lot to say about what God says to all his children. What God says to all his children, without distinction of race, without distinction of social status, without distinction of ethnic background, without distinction of education, without distinction of sexual attributes. And when you look at scripture and you look at just the God who is not partial, the God who shows no partiality and gives every single one of his children the same blessings, the same inheritance, the same privileges, and the same call. It's amazing. And I think that that's actually not been part of the discussion enough. What we all have in common in the Christian environment, I think we really need to go back and look at what this gospel says to all of us, because sometimes we focus on one or two verses and forget the rest. So I'm just going to put that out there, because I like to create trouble. But I really think that the more we discover the amazing identity and the amazing love of a Father who knows what he's doing with our lives, even sickness, he knows what he's doing. And there are people I've been able to minister to that I wouldn't have been able to minister to if I hadn't gone through my journey. And I'm thankful now, as an older person who's gone through a lot and who's finally free from the curse, free from that monthly inhibiting, free from cramps. Menopause was wonderful for me. It was like, yes, I can plan camping trips without having to look at the calendar. And and so realizing, okay, it was really hard. Those years of having menstrual periods was really, really hard for me, emotionally and other ways. But it was, temporary.
As someone with a wife and 3 girls and no boys other than me in the family, it's an area where I'm fully aware of, and also fully aware that my wife can handle all that. But I guess where, so Catherine and Mama Kay have been sharing some thoughts and stuff, but I found this, I don't know if there's anything you want to say to Catherine on this.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think sometimes in our Christian environments, the gender stereotypes can be more defined than elsewhere. And I actually tried for a while to be the kind of Christian woman people wanted me to be, and then gave that up and said, no, I'm just going to be who God wants me to be, because I'm not going to satisfy everybody anyway. And so I think we need to, talk about this. Talk about this as Christians. Are we helping people discover their unique part in God's mission and God's plan? Or are we trying to put them into molds that might be hindering his work?
I think your statement of the uniqueness is important, because it's been I don't know what to call it, philosophical perspective of mine, that it came out of when John's disciples were leaving him to follow Jesus. And he said, the person can receive nothing unless the Father, unless the Father does it or gives it to that person. And so there were times in my life where I thought, man, I would like to do this, and why did I get passed over for that? Or that I was tempted to think about that, but that always came back. And so the uniqueness, here's what I suspect, that if a person decides, what is it God wants me to do? What does he want me to, and the mission will be different for every person, how that plays out. I could be wrong, and I realize what I say might be controversial here, but I personally suspect that if a person wishes to be wholly devoted to God, nothing in this world can stop God from carrying out his unique mission through that particular person. Now, we may see all sorts of obstacles. They're irrelevant. If God has a plan, and this is what he wants to do. So I always came back, well, what does God want? What's my mission? What does God want me to do personally? And that's what I'll focus on, and trust that God will open the doors and close the doors, and he has closed doors. But I see a closed door, like there's closed doors that close for all the wrong reasons. I mean, one was just blatant case of discrimination that prevented me from doing a PhD at this particular university, and they put it in writing. Actually, it was no secret, and it could have been extremely frustrating to me. And it wasn't a gender thing here. It was just that I didn't fit the demographic.
Yeah.
He wanted, so it wasn't, but it was blatantly unjust. But yet at the same time, I thought, if God had wanted me in this program, he'd have got me in. And he's permitted this, as unjust as it is. He's permitted it because he has a particular twist in my path. And that takes an enormous amount of frustration off my back, because I could really get frustrated by something like that. And that might be a part of it, to accept except myself, or each one of us, for who we are with all our uniqueness, and not try and think that we should fit this or that, but just to say, God, what is it that you'd have me to do here? Here I am. And I know you'll open the doors and you'll close the doors and you'll direct me.
Yeah.
And that takes that, as I said, the frustration. It's easy for me to stay awake all night, just stewing over something that was unjust. And
Yeah.
that's bad enough as it is. Even with what I just said, I still will do it, stewing over injustice, mostly from 2 a.m. till about 6 a.m.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I think that's it. Is God, do I know just how sovereign God is, how powerful he is? And am I willing to trust that, like you said, when a door is closed, there's another one open? And I mean, I've been in ministry for 40 years, right? Well, paid ministry longer than that, but paid ministry for 40 years. And
vocational ministry for long.
Yeah. And
well, as a child, you were a priest for a bit too.
Well, I was pretending, but it is true that even as a child, I had this desire to know God and serve him, even though I hadn't yet understood how God had made that possible through Jesus. It was only at 16 I really understood what Jesus had done for me. But because I grew up in an environment where God was so revered and respected and loved, I couldn't imagine anything more beautiful than living for Jesus. And I still can't. And that's really what it all comes down to in the end, is trusting God with my life, trusting him with my body. And there have been times when my body, and trusting God with my body, knowing that any suffering in this world is very temporary compared to eternity.
And you speak from experience, Anne-Marie, because I remember seeing you in a wheelchair a number of years ago. And I figured, wow, I had no idea what God's next steps were for you in your life. But even then, it's not been an easy row to hoe, so to speak.
I was going to say, when Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh, I think of Anne-Marie having a whole rose bush that she has to carry around.
Come on, guys.
No, but to be honest,
it's not fun.
Yeah,
hearing
seriously.
the stories of the stuff you've gone through, and then knowing that some of the past, where it's you got the mental struggle, you've got the physical struggle, and yet what God's done through you over the last 40 plus years of ministry, it has been amazing. And I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, that you're retired.
Yeah, it's in 4 days we can say it.
And so you're retiring.
Yeah.
And
but not retiring from loving God and serving him.
Putting different treads on.
Yeah.
Because now you're going more off-road. But I look at what God's done, and it's only because you've been faithful. And I know we've taken a turn from what the title of this video is, but this
not
is
really,
where
though.
This is, and so as we have 10 minutes left here, what are the things that you'd like to make sure as we end that people hear?
Well, I think there's several things. One is when we try to escape struggle, we also escape growth. And I think a lot of what's pushing kids into these different decisions is something, I can make my life easier. And it's an illusion. It's an illusion that can be harmful. And so become realistic about this life. It's going to be hard. There's going to be struggles. You won't like everything about what you have to go through, who you are, what the society what the society does to you sometimes. But if you go through it with God, you will feel more and more loved. You'll feel more and more free, and you will feel more and more significant. And so, join the journey. Join the journey with God. And he knows why he made you the way you are.
And I like how you focused on the God part and not the church part.
And
yeah,
because it's not the same.
Some people, I know you've got strong feelings about certain things in the church, but can you just share for those that are not in a place with the church that they feel they can be in communion with God? How you make that distinction?
Each and every one of us is on a journey. The church is filled with people who are on a journey and who know more or less who God is and what he wants us to be as a community. So we're going to hurt each other, but God is safe. God is always safe. He's safe in the sense that you'll never find a greater love, a greater freedom, and a greater destiny. And so, be involved in church because it helps you to love. And you learn to love because people are imperfect. And so the more imperfect people are, the more you're going to learn to love with God's love.
So what you're saying is you don't go to church for what the church can do for you.
You go to church because it's a way of living life the way God wants, which is in community and families are messy. But, but be grounded in him so you can be yourself in that environment, and look for people who are willing to let you be you in that environment.
Now, there's one thing you just said, Anne-Marie, that I think we should just touch on here. We've done a lot of talking about being ourselves, and our society does as well. But when I look at myself, I know that I'm not perfect. It's not like I'm probably not perfect. I'm not perfect for certain. And I don't even know the ways that I need work. I assume it's in a lot of areas, a ton of areas. So on the one hand, it seems important to accept my uniqueness, accept that God has created me. On the other hand, it seems that not everything about being myself is a good idea, especially if I was just being myself in heavy traffic when somebody cuts me off. Or as Sheldon is saying, being yourself during a hockey game. But so it does seem that, again, it's just, here I am, God. I find it's not that helpful to try and change myself in ways that I think I need to change, because even that is a bad idea, I think. It's more like, here I am, God. Make me the kind of person you created me to be, and that'll be unique. But it'll be like a refiner's fire. You talked about suffering, slowly burning off the stuff that's my natural way I am, that's not so great, that needs to. I don't think God intended us to wind up the way we were naturally started off at. But there is a uniqueness through the whole process. And there's no one who has ever existed that can be exactly like you or like me. We're so unique.
Yeah.
I just thought it was important to bring up this about being ourselves, accepting ourselves, but at the same time, realizing we're a work in progress in the sight of God. But on the other hand, trying to fix ourselves up.
Yeah. And a way of saying it theologically is that the Christian life is of grace from beginning to end.
Mm-hmm.
And the Apostle Paul liked to talk about the difference between law and grace. And he wasn't saying, hey, you don't have to follow any rules. That's not what he was saying. He was saying what we only could do in our own strength before, now God himself comes to live in us, to change us and enable us to do. And that's grace. It's God in me, changing me. It's God in me, giving me the ability to love him and love others. It's God in me through his Spirit, changing me so I'm becoming more and more like Jesus. And in eternity, that work is complete. It is fulfilled. We are glorified. We are like Jesus because we see him as he is. And that's the hope, because we all get down on ourselves. We can really condemn ourselves.
Yep. Beat ourselves up.
But there's no condemnation in Jesus, because God, what he started, he's going to complete it. And it's by faith from A to Z. And it's God working in us, not us working for God. And so
we try and fix ourselves up with maybe making up some more rules.
Yeah.
So I don't do that next time. But
Yeah.
that I'm old enough to know that's a hopeless endeavor. It's rather the grace that you mentioned means you're still loved although we're not perfect, but at the same time, he's molding and shaping us like a potter does a vase.
And forgiving us
Mm-hmm.
for everything completely. And there's nothing we can add to what he is working out. And so God is the one who enables us to be ourselves, but to be fully ourselves and eternally ourselves without sin, without any effects of the fall. That's good news. I love sharing that with anyone who listen. You know, the suffering's temporary, the glory's forever.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for stopping by. We'll probably have you on again because you're really good at this. And I know
we can talk her into that.
We can talk about any subject, and Anne-Marie will have opinions on it. So that is also really fun. Kirk, anything you want to share before we finish off here? Who's on next week?
I think Anne-Marie has just really put it well. So no,
Who's on
nothing
first
else
next week?
except
I don't have the calendar on.
I'm talking with a guy. I'm not saying for sure yet, but we might have a guy doing his PhD in in ancient biblical documents, just to talk to us about. We'll have a discussion about. Like this morning, I was just talking. Somebody had said, "Well, you can't really talk about the history of the Bible without talking about the Sumerian tablets." So I says, "Hey, Wes, what do you think of this?" And he says, "Oh, I got a video on that." And of
course,
I just got in touch with him this morning, so we'll see if it works out for next week, and if not, it's a surprise.
Okay, well, this time next week, 12:30 Central, 1:30 Eastern. We'd love to have you back. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, hit the little bell thing to get notified when we're going to be going live again, or whenever Kirk posts one of his fun videos. Thank you all for watching. We gotta go. See you next week. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Bye.
Pleasure to be here.
Bye, everyone.